JTKS, our government is a form of anarchy. It looks like you're saying polysyndicate law, which I understand is linked to Wikipedia, can be enforced using force, like guns. It sounds like just another government to me. Is it just more decentralized? Pepper Bunch, polysyndicate law exists now, but it's not decentralized yet. We can campaign to change government or set up different ones, and I advocate both. The anarchistic idea to me is simply recognizing there's no social contract, so we see that we are not indebted laborers. The masses are currently unwilling to change for the better, either through voting for taxes or deciding their own spending, so it's more hypothetical. Pepper Bunch, quote, when it's about moralists, just chat with labor, I'm pretty sure boycotts are illegal, end quote. Probably wrong as far as the market, but I'm not looking at it. Definitely wrong as far as the government. I'm not allowed to boycott taxes when they're being used for killing children in Iraq. Jyoti Chaos, you're correct. When the government is doing moral wrong, the only things you can do are protest and vote. When a company is doing moral wrong, if you had no government, the only things you could do are protest and boycott, both of which are legal against a company with a government. Pepper Bunch, and this last point actually applies to the video, which is that the justification of the government forced monopoly of so-called moral regulation is the social contract, when if the regulation is moral and the social contract is bullshit, then anyone should have that regulating power, but there will be disputes which require dispute resolution organizations. Jyoti Chaos, the quote, the homesteading principle is any attempt to justify current ownership. We have legal versions of the homesteading principle, linked to Wikipedia. That it is a perverse twisting of the original idea does reflect on the original idea, just as hateful Christians who twist the Bible reflect on the Bible and Christianity in general. Pepper Bunch, but do libertarians care about the legal version? No, they have their own version. See the disambiguation of homestead principle for their version. As far as government ending child labor abuses, it only did it after a long-ass time of government not ending it, and if you read libertarian writings on it, they argue that government was one of the main obstacles in the way. Rewind. Or not. It's a thought-stopping chaos. Capitalists can be thugs more so than a freely elected republic. At least the masses can vote out blatant thuggery from the government. No, taxes aren't blatant thuggery. I'm talking children working at Starpoint, workers being locked inside hazardous buildings and being burned alive, 14-hour workdays, price gouging, and a competition. Basically, worker exploitation and systematic manipulation of every sort. Cut every corner no matter what workers or consumers might get hurt. Freedom. Pepper Bunch, no nightmares are lame. You're looking at 1 million dead in Iraq and in Vietnam thanks to taxation and nonetheless government, and you're whining that isolated incidents are things that are imposed on people by their own poor decisions. And if you don't think that Steph's plan of dear rose is meant to stop you in those events, then you're wrong. Government monopolies aren't needed for safety regulation because we all want those. Dirty Cast, quote, you're looking at 1 million dead in Iraq. Absolutely, governments can be wrong. Ironically, the low taxation limited government conservative party that's responsible, but they're in bed with religious rights, so go figure. Quote, isolated incidents. Child labor, 14-hour days, etc. Forced Starpoint, I'll define in a second, was common a century plus ago, Industrial Revolution. Cases like the Triangle Factory fire caused government regulations to prevent instances. Common as in what numbers? Government was directly involved in child labor and long work weeks. They promoted it, even institutionalized it, realized there are alternative solutions monopolies to government, which isn't a solution but simply an unnecessary middleman for the real solution of people. No one wants to live in a shithole. Dirty Chaos. Good question. I'll try to find hard statistics. I've never heard of someone doubt the horrors of the Industrial Revolution on the poor. Linked to Wikipedia. It was government laws that worked against child labor, not for it. Pika. Child labor was phased out by the product increase from the agricultural economy to an industrial one. Government basically formalized it. In Bangladesh, child labor was fought by law, resulting in children being abandoned and working on the street, mainly prostitutes. The child labor article in Wikipedia has a link to the UNICEF report. In other comments, you show no economic understanding. If you'd like to read into it, link to Mrs. Triticast, you link to Economics for Real People and an introduction to the Austrian school. I'm well aware you're all Austrian school lovers. That's the whole debate is about, the pros and cons of lack of regulation. If you start with the premise that anybody who disagrees with you on economic policy simply lacks economic understanding, we can never have a discussion. Continuing on Austrian school paper, it's amazing how much space they devote to dismissing, albeit not altogether, the value of real-world economic statistics. Example, quote, for one thing, if the person running experiments is liked by these subjects, they'll often try to figure out what result he wants and act to bring it about, end quote. It's hard to read this blatantly misleading crap. A person acts in his own interest on the economic scene, not the interest of whoever is doing the interventions. Pika, YouTube isn't a good medium for discussion. Pika, with regard to your Austrian quote, Google has no results for it. If you go to Mrs.org, you'll find that they have a lot of analysis on indices of production, money supply, inflation, etc. I won't say no one has said it, but it doesn't sound like an Austrian view. What Austrians are sometimes criticized about is on their focus on dynamic equilibrium, which doesn't favor. Chaos was actually quoting the paper you sent me, page 35, section 1, The Science of Human Action. Quote, what Austrians are sometimes criticized about is their focus on dynamic equilibriums, which doesn't favor models much. As in, real-world models don't support their idealized free market scenarios. Dismiss. Pika, you introduced the quote as if he was talking about statistics. He was referring that you can't tell much from economic psychological experiments. Chaos, earlier in that section, quote, the first obstacle to trying to proceed along strongly empirical grounds in economics is that humans act differently when they know they are being watched, end quote. The author is justifying the survivor thought experiment over real-world scenarios. Indeed, he implicitly dismisses the validity of any economic boons from government intervention on the grounds that people can't be experimented on. Pika, you sound like an Austrian. They're usually dismissed because they don't stick much to models, which is very prominent in mainstream neoclassical economics. As a matter of fact, neoclassics started from the adaptation of physical models to explain economic interactions like Fisher. By the way, free market has nothing to do with Austrians necessarily. Free boon is usually more associated with it, actually. Dirty Chaos, the exact opposite. I'm explaining why Austrian reasoning is wrong. You dismiss real-world models. Pika, that's like saying a meteorologist doesn't believe in real-world atmospheric models. Doesn't make any sense. Anyway, I should point out that I'm not really that knowledgeable of Austrians. Of course, we mentioned F.A. Hayek, but not really the school. I've come across their website a year or so ago and love the material. Price isn't bad either. Directed chaos. Quote, child labor was phased out by the product increase from the agricultural economy to industrial one. Government basically formalized it. I don't follow. The industrial economy encouraged child labor on a scale the agricultural economy didn't. In Bangladesh, child labor was fought by law, resulting in children being banned. Clearly, the real problem is families being forced to sell their children into labor instead of educating them. Welfare, public education, food stamps. Pika, family moved to the cities because they increased productivity. In my country, there were a lot of kids working in farms even a couple of generations ago. It requires Pika. There's already state-run schools in Bangladesh and a lot of other state programs. The issue is there's an amount of product you can appropriate. The national product there doesn't allow for that, unlike a rich country might. Anyway, make it sound as if free markets don't maximize social utility. I'd love to read your material you have to base your position. Directed chaos, Wikipedia market failure. In one word, exploitation. Pika, referring to over-exploitation of natural resources, the only instance of the word being used there. Market failures, of course, refer to efficiency. For example, it's impractical to allow everybody to sue a factory for air pollution in their home, so you have to come up with a social response for it. Directed chaos, not only pollution is actually an externality, links help. Monopolies and all other anti-competitive actions are exploitative. With pollution, the libertarian stance tends to be support property rights and lawsuits will replace EPA. This is a dream. You mentioned one counter. Zoning regulation rules are simpler, fairer than endless lawsuits. Another, some negative effects are simply too tenuous, like overfishing. Pika, monopoly used to refer to occupations whose supply was protected by the state. Friedman states market forces don't develop similar situations because even if someone dominates the supply of some good, they won't be able to restrict entry. I think he agreed in some cases like natural resources, but he didn't see it as a problem. Overfishing has not to do with markets, but with a common property. A market, like fishing licenses, is actually a solution. Directed chaos, quote, monopoly used to refer to occupations whose supply was protected by the state. This is an invalid reduction that free market economists make. Monopolies have a clear economic definition. A group that corners the market reminds me of a game called Pit. They develop despite government restrictions, and when they develop, governments prevent them from exercising their monopoly power via antitrust laws that have been around since the Roman era. Directed chaos, quote, because even if someone dominates the supply of some good, they won't be able to restrict entry. There are several complicated issues related to this to discuss. First, there is growing entry costs, partially because of growing efficiency. Say you want to compete with Intel because AMD goes out of business and Intel jacks up the prices. You need to buy tons of factories, scientists, etc. to catch up. High cost of entry. Continuing on monopolies. Second, violations of antitrust laws, even when a legal monopoly develops, include using your monopoly power in one industry to force your way into another industry. For example, say Microsoft adds malicious code to their OS that blocked Google. Would people turn to Linux and OS X with all the hassles involved in converting operating systems, or just surf to Microsoft Yahoo for search instead? This is an extreme. They did lesser versions with bundling software. Pika, there are a lot of CPU chip manufacturers out there. Intel and AMD are the main ones for IBM PC desktop towers, but other manufacturers would kick in if Intel somehow managed to increase its worldwide supply and beat AMD in price and quality. It's not like AMD factories get destroyed either. Anyway, I don't find examples of high-cost capital to be that compelling because rich countries have such sophisticated financial institutions that are dying to such investment opportunities. By the way, the more compelling monopoly cases I've read are the natural resources one, but I think it was Friedman that claimed it's not that bad to have an agent rationing in the resources in order to push for alternative uses. Directed chaos, quote, I don't find examples of high-cost capital to be that compelling. Financial institutions are dying to such investment opportunities. Yes, but that's ignoring the risk. Say you scrounge up the capital to buy the scientist factories, distribution, etc., to work out the new, due to intellectual property rights, desktop chip architecture that can compete with Intel. Then, after putting up all that capital, Intel just underprices you out of the market. Walmart does this. Attrition war. Pika, I guess Intel could go non-profit and get some cheap CEO that is as competent to keep workers and customers happy with the offerings. A more serious situation has happened in the recession that led to the Great Depression, the internet bubble, U.S. housing, speculation, etc. is forecasting interest rates. You can always plan losses for years, but you need to trust the interest rates to stick executed. And of course, interest rates are set by the government, not directly but by the central bank, whose government embodies a monopoly power to issue the money. The U.S. interest rates have actually been negative to inflation for a good while, and I think they have risen it now, but just by a little bit, which is causing a lot of issue with the economy. Speaking of Austrians, F.A. Hayek got the Nobel for his work relating to the business cycle. Directed chaos, quote, Intel could go non-profit. Microsoft sold Xbox at a loss. Even if you just sell in marginal to no profits, you can still starve your competition out if they have lost capital, which they probably do if they're a startup challenger. Companies do this all the time to mom-and-pop stores, then re-raise prices after competition folds. Quote, a more serious situation has happened with the recession that leads to the Great Depression, internet bubble, U.S. housing speculation, etc. is forecasting interest rates. I don't believe the problem with bubbles is forecasting interest rates. Interest rates are a reaction to bubbles. Bubbles grow out of excessive profit speculation, and like a mob of cheering idiots, the speculation builds on itself. Boom and bust cycles are simply part of capitalism. Pika, you have the interest rates and money supplied by the central, and then from the commercial banks or other credit institutions that access central bank money. Sure, there's a speculatory element because the commercial banks don't want to lose the money, so they aren't going to lend money just because of. But a generalized problem can only come about when there are not enough resources available. People weren't starving on that level. For the money that is being loaned and interest rates are unexpectedly risen, otherwise it could cause inflation. For instance, in the recent USA housing speculation, the central bank was setting interest rates for housing lower than the price at what the banks were appreciating. They were negative, so even unemployed people could get those loans. Directed chaos, subprime lending was the problem, and that's when the rate is higher than normal. Wikipedia subprime lending. The companies, and to a lesser extent but still significant their targets, are to blame, not the Fed. The real debate, as I understand it, deals with the value of bailouts.